It was 2014 inside New York City's most notorious jail complex, Rikers Island. The sound of iron doors echoed across the cell blocks as new inmates were processed through the intake center. The air was thick with tension, fear, and something darker, resignation. Everyone knew what Rikers meant. It wasn't just a jail. It was a place where time moved slower, where hope decayed, and where survival meant everything. Inside dorm C-76, a 23-year-old named Marcus Hill sat on a metal bench, his eyes scanning the chaos. He had been arrested for a minor robbery charge, but Rikers didn't care what brought you here. Once those gates shut, every man was equal. Equal in fear, equal in danger. Around him, the atmosphere was electric. Correctional officers shouted orders while inmates sized up newcomers, deciding who was weak and who might last. Marcus had never been to jail before, but he already understood one rule: never look scared. The cells were narrow concrete boxes with rusted toilets and broken lights. The smell of sweat and disinfectant clung to the air. At night, the silence was broken by the sound of fights echoing down the hall. Guards rarely intervened until it was too late. For many, Rikers wasn't about punishment. It was about survival of the fittest. Marcus quickly realized that violence wasn't random here. It was organized chaos, a hierarchy built on intimidation and control. The strongest inmates ran the dorms, controlling food, beds, and even access to phones. Everyone else paid in silence. One morning, Marcus watched as another inmate, barely 18, was dragged into the showers by two older men. The officers looked the other way. The screams didn't last long. That was the moment Marcus understood that Rikers wasn't designed to rehabilitate. It was designed to break people. By the third week, Marcus stopped eating in the cafeteria. The food trays were often filled with spoiled meat or cold rice, and fights broke out over small pieces of bread. The kitchen was run by inmates, and food was another weapon of control. Those who refused to obey lost their meals. Those who complained were punished by both inmates and guards. During lockdowns, the air became unbearable. Inmates were trapped inside their cells for days, sometimes weeks, without fresh air or sunlight. The heat in the summer reached unbearable levels, and the cold in winter made it hard to sleep. Some inmates would light paper just to feel warmth for a few seconds before the guards came to punish them for it. Marcus met an older inmate named Reggie, a man who had survived nearly a decade on the island. Reggie taught him how to read the guards, how to trade cigarettes for protection, and how to make it out alive. "You don't fight every battle," Reggie said. "You just fight to see tomorrow." But even Reggie wasn't invincible. One night during a cell check, an argument broke out between Reggie and an officer. The next morning, his bed was empty. The guard said he was transferred, but everyone in the dorm knew what that meant. Marcus's mental health began to spiral. Nights were filled with anxiety and nightmares. He started talking to himself, a habit he couldn't stop. Around him, other inmates were losing their minds, banging on cell doors, screaming into the void, begging for medical help that never came. Rikers had a mental health unit, but it was overcrowded, underfunded, and often ignored. Many inmates with psychological issues were placed in solitary confinement instead of treatment. Solitary was a small, windowless cell where you could lose your mind in less than a week. The walls pressed in, and the silence became a weapon. This story took hours of research and real inmate interviews to piece together. If you want to support more stories like this and help shine light on the reality inside America's prisons, make sure to subscribe and share this video. It really helps. As days turned into months, Marcus's case was delayed over and over again. He hadn't even been convicted, yet he was living in a place worse than any prison he could imagine. He saw people stabbed for control of the TV remote, beaten for refusing to join a gang, and punished for showing kindness. Then came the riot. It started in another dorm but spread like fire. Inmates banged on doors, breaking pipes, flooding the corridors. The sound of boots, alarms, and screams filled the air. Marcus hid under his bunk as smoke filled the block. It wasn't just chaos, it was desperation. For the first time, he thought he wouldn't make it out alive. When the riot was over, dozens were injured, several hospitalized, and the entire complex was locked down for weeks. The media called it another outbreak of violence. Inside, inmates called it Tuesday. After 6 months, Marcus finally went to trial. The judge dismissed his charges due to lack of evidence. He walked out of Rikers Island with the same clothes he came in with, but not the same mind. The sun felt unreal, and the noise of traffic overwhelmed him. Freedom wasn't peace. Freedom was just another kind of silence. He would later say in an interview, "Rikers doesn't end when you leave. It follows you. The noise, the fear, the memories, they don't stop." That's what happens inside Rikers Island. It's not just a place, it's a scar that never fades. 7:42 p.m., the fluorescent lights hum over the cell block like angry insects. Inside Rikers Island, night doesn't bring peace. It brings noise, chaos, and fear. In a corner unit known by everyone as the pit, 20 men share a space built for 8. The air is thick, heavy with sweat, bleach, and something metallic, the smell of dried blood that no one cleans up properly. You can hear the slamming of steel doors, the yelling of officers, the coughs of inmates pretending to sleep. This is not just another night on Rikers. This is survival hour. A man named Luis stands near the toilet, his back to the wall, eyes never blinking. He's been here 6 months, but it feels like 6 years. He tells anyone who'll listen that time doesn't move in the pit. It stretches, suffocates, and eats you alive. Around him, other inmates argue over space on the concrete floor. One man wraps himself in a torn blanket. Another bangs on the bars begging for medical attention that won't come. The officers walk past as if the noise is nothing more than background static. This is how the pit breaks people, not with violence alone, but with silence and indifference. Earlier that day, a fight broke out in the cafeteria. A plastic tray was used as a weapon. Someone lost a tooth. Someone else got locked in solitary. But here in the pit, punishment is routine. Even when the fight is over, the fear lingers. Every man inside knows that at any moment, someone might snap again. Luis learned that lesson on his second week, when a new inmate named Rico tried to take his bunk. They fought, and by morning, Rico was gone, transferred to the box, solitary confinement. No one ever saw him again. The officers say the pit is under control. But inside, inmates run their own order. The strong dictate, the weak disappear. The older inmates call it the system inside the system. Cigarettes, instant noodles, and favors are currency. Food is power. Water is survival. And information, that's worth more than anything. Everyone watches everyone else, waiting for someone to slip up, waiting for the next mistake. The place has a heartbeat of its own, slow and irregular, like a dying machine that refuses to stop working. By midnight, the yelling fades, replaced by whispers. Luis closes his eyes, but doesn't sleep. He remembers what life was like before, his daughter's laugh, the sound of the subway, the smell of rain on asphalt. But Rikers erases memories. Here, you only remember what keeps you alive. Every night feels like the same nightmare playing on repeat. And still, no one outside truly understands what happens in here. Inmates say there are two Rikers, the one you read about in the papers, and the one that eats your soul. In the newspapers, it's a correctional facility. On the inside, it's a forgotten city of the condemned. There are no clocks, no windows. You can't tell morning from night, hope from despair. The pit is where men are stripped of everything that made them human: identity, dignity, reason. What remains is instinct. One officer, who's been here 10 years, says off camera, "You stop being a person here. You become a problem to manage." He doesn't say it with cruelty. He says it with exhaustion. The same exhaustion you see in the faces of the men he guards. Everyone is trapped in the same machine. Guards, inmates, even medical staff. The machine keeps turning, fueled by anger and neglect. At 3:18 a.m., an alarm goes off. Another fight. Another broken jaw. Officers rush in swinging batons. The lights flash red, then white, then red again. For 5 minutes, it's chaos. Bodies on the floor, shouting, the metallic clang of keys. When it's over, there's blood smeared across the wall and silence returns. Luis sits in his corner again, shaking, staring at the red stain. No one cleans it. By morning, it will be dry and invisible, like the rest of the pain inside the pit. They call it short-term detention, but some inmates spend years waiting for trial. Innocent or guilty, it doesn't matter. Rikers becomes their home, their nightmare, their world. And the pit, it's where they learn that the real punishment isn't time, it's what time does to you. Your body gets weaker. Your voice grows quieter. You stop dreaming. You stop believing anyone out there still remembers you exist. At 4 a.m., the intercom crackles. Count time. The men line up against the wall, eyes half closed. The officer counts slowly, calling each number like a funeral bell. After that, silence again. Luis sits back down and whispers, "This place ain't made to hold us. It's made to bury us." The camera lingers on his face. Hollow eyes, cracked lips, the reflection of steel bars behind him. He's not lying. Rikers doesn't reform people. It erases them. If you've made it this far, you already know, what happens inside Rikers doesn't just stay there. It haunts everyone who's ever been inside, long after they leave. This video took days of research, interviews, and editing to put together. If you believe more people should see what really happens behind these walls, hit subscribe. It helps more than you think, and it keeps these stories alive. Because stories like Luis's, the ones buried in the pit, deserve to be heard before they vanish forever. 6:12 a.m., the sun rises over New York City, golden light spilling across the East River. But just beyond the water, behind layers of fences and razor wire, that same sunrise means nothing. For the men who spent years on Rikers Island, morning feels like another illusion. Freedom isn't the moment they walk out the gate. It's the long road of trying to become human again after being caged for too long. When Luis finally left Rikers, he carried only a small plastic bag, one pair of shoes, a paper cup, and a folded discharge paper that still smelled like disinfectant. He stepped onto Queen's soil like a man walking on another planet. The air felt different. Too open. Too loud. Cars, sirens, voices, everything sounded like freedom, but also like danger. People passed him on the street. unaware that this man had just survived a world most will never see. But freedom from Rikers isn't the end of the story. It's the beginning of another kind of sentence. For years, Luis had learned how to survive constant noise, tension, and threat. Now, in the outside world, silence feels heavier than steel doors. He can't sleep in soft beds. He startles at every loud sound. He avoids crowds. He doesn't talk much. Like many others who leave Rikers, the prison followed him home. It lingers in his dreams, his heartbeat, his shadow. He's not alone. Thousands of men and women have walked out of Rikers with the same invisible scars. Some call it Rikers syndrome, a haunting mix of anxiety, distrust, and rage. They come out broken by a system that was supposed to hold them, not destroy them. Many end up back behind bars within months. Not because they're criminals, but because Rikers took away the part of them that could function outside. It teaches survival, not peace. Suspicion, not trust. Violence, not patience. Luis joined a support group for former inmates, meeting every Thursday in a small Bronx church basement. The room smells like burnt coffee and floor polish. There's a circle of folding chairs. Some men speak, some stare at the ground. They all have stories that sound the same. Fights, hunger, punishment, sleepless nights. One man says he spent 6 months in solitary and hasn't slept more than 2 hours straight since. Another man shows his wrists, scars from handcuffs that were too tight. You don't just do time at Rikers, he says. Rikers does time inside you. Outside that basement, the city keeps moving. Tourists walk through Times Square. Students rush to class. No one thinks about the island sitting quietly across the river, an island that holds thousands who never got their day in court. An island where young men lost their minds waiting for trials that never came. Rikers exists out of sight, out of mind. And that's how it survives. Hidden, forgotten, tolerated. In 2015, after years of investigations, reports described Rikers as a place of systemic brutality. Journalists exposed stories of suicides, medical neglect, and violence from both inmates and staff. One report detailed how a teenager, Khalif Browder, spent 3 years there, mostly in solitary, for a crime he was never convicted of. When he was released, the trauma stayed. 2 years later, he took his own life. His story forced America to look at Rikers again, but only for a moment. The cameras moved on. The system didn't. Luis knows Browder's story by heart. Every ex-inmate does. It's whispered like a warning. It's proof that even when you escape Rikers physically, it doesn't let go. That's why, years later, Luis still walks past metal fences with his eyes down, still flinches when someone shouts behind him. He hasn't broken a law since, but he says he never truly feels free. You can't heal where the world doesn't believe you were hurt, he tells the camera quietly. Rikers doesn't end when you leave it. It ends when you stop seeing yourself as what it made you. Every reform plan, every political promise says the same thing. Rikers will close. But the years pass, and the walls still stand. The name remains, whispered in courtrooms, rap lyrics, and nightmares. People still arrive every week in handcuffs, and others still leave with nothing but plastic bags and paperwork. For some, the ferry ride away from Rikers feels like resurrection. For others, it's just a pause before the next collapse. Luis works now with a reentry program, helping young men who are fresh out of jail find jobs. He tells them to breathe when they panic, to write when they can't speak, to keep walking even when the world feels against them. Some listen. Some vanish back into the system. He says the hardest part isn't surviving Rikers. It's convincing yourself you deserve to live after it. The story of Rikers Island isn't just about what happens behind bars. It's about what happens after the bars open. It's about the ghosts walking among us. Men and women who smile in daylight, but still dream in darkness. The city may forget them, but they never forget the smell of bleach, the slam of cell doors, or the echo of a name shouted down a cold corridor. 8:40 p.m., the camera fades on the skyline. Lights shimmer on the water, reflecting off the unseen island that still holds its secrets. Luis's voice fades in. They say Rikers is just a jail, not a prison. But to me, it was both. It was a place where time died and people disappeared. If this story hit you, if you believe people deserve to know what happens inside places like Rikers, subscribe, share, and comment below. Every click keeps stories like this alive. Every share shines a little more light on the darkness. Because the real haunting isn't inside Rikers. It's what happens when the world stops caring about it.